at some point, you have that reflection. It's like, actually what you're doing is you're doing financial inclusion, but at a B2B scale. But actually, it's about in the supply chain, how quickly can you get the product out to that consumer? If you take 9 months to buy one piece of tech, you are dead in the water. Our vision is to be the place where enterprise goes to buy technology.
Today we have Karan Jain, the CEO and founder of Naya One, which provides banks with access to hundreds of fintechs and data sets from a single access point. Karan's got a long journey before getting to where he is today, having started off in tax, moving around different countries, getting into banking, getting very senior, before looking at what's the problems that he keeps seeing they want to get changed. And many of you might understand working at large corporates, how hard it is for new companies to get through all the bureaucracy and all the red tape to get in so they can test. And this is the problem that he kept seeing over and over again that he wanted to tackle. And now there's hundreds of fintechs on his platform that banks can get access to. And this is to expand into the future into all different types of companies so that startups and innovative companies can get into corporates much easier. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. So glad to have you on today, and you've done so many incredible things now, and Naya One is growing so well. But if you rewind, right, so where did this all start from? What did you actually want to be when you were a kid?
Thank you for having me, Amr. Great to be here. What did I want to be as a kid? I think like any Indian kid, you're probably going down the doctor, lawyer, engineer kind of route. My parents, one was in the bank and the other one's a psychologist. I'm like, okay, look, that's kind of where I started. I've got a cousin who's a pilot, so okay, pilot sounds cool. So I don't actually recall where I landed, but those seem to be the memory.
And did you feel like you were pressured to go down those kind of routes, or was it more like you just weren't sure at that point?
No, I wasn't. I don't think I was pressured. You naturally get attracted to maths and physics just because because how you're growing up. And when I was at uni, when I was finishing school, I was looking at what to do. I ended up picking engineering and accounting. And the reason I picked engineering and accounting as a double degree, because I wasn't sure about either of them.
Yeah. Good way, yeah.
So it was like, the kind of thinking at that point was, okay, if the world is growing, they'll need engineers. If the world is consolidating, they'll need accountants. I really don't know what I want to do. So why don't I do both? So that's how I ended up with that.
And in studying both of those, what did you find you enjoyed more when you were at university?
You know what? For different reasons, for different reasons, I enjoyed the business and the accounting degree because it was at nighttime, which means I could enjoy during the day. And I started working really early on during the university. So something I could work, I could earn, and then I can go. So I enjoyed that. The engineering side, I enjoyed because how it challenged my brain to think differently. And I remember going through the degree, I was like, there is no way I'm ever using this in real life, like on a weekly basis. Like this makes no sense. I'd never use it in real life. But anyway, let's just get through it. Only towards the end and after your degree, you realize it actually wasn't about what they were teaching you, the content, like on circuits at work, but it's how it trains your brain. So I enjoyed both of them, but for different reasons.
I remember I was always frustrated because after I studied economics and at Bath, and what they actually wanted from Bath was all the engineers in consulting. I was like, but I studied this topic. But like you said, it's that thought process which is so important.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you started working quite early as well at university. What were you doing there?
So I was just catching up with somebody, another Asian friend, and it's like, I'm going as an intern at investment banking. I'm like, that sounds horrible. I don't want to do that. Like, there's a part of me that wants to prioritize life and not just grind it, But then I'm like, couldn't help it. So I was like, how do you find that? And this is back in Sydney, right? So that's where I grew up. And he said, just go to the job website, don't type in intern, type in the bank or the wherever you want to work type of thing. I can't remember what it was, but there was some little hack, did it. And some cadet job popped up for, like $19,000 a year type of thing. And I was like, all right. So I just applied for it. I actually worked as a cadet accountant at a mid-tier accounting firm, which I really enjoyed. Like best grounding from a business, like what drives a business and those points.
So I guess because you enjoyed that, is that where you carried on after university down that path?
So that's what I was doing. So I did that for a couple of years while I was finishing uni. And then, another conversation, hanging out with friends. I was like, there's graduate programs opening up in, KPMG, EY, that I'm like, oh, interesting. Went back to that site, typed it in. So I actually didn't find a graduate position, found like a lateral hire position. But because I already had 2 years working experience, I hadn't finished my degree, I applied for it, got the interviewed well because I had professional experience compared to the grads that were getting interviewed, and got hired, not as a grad, but as a consultant while I was younger and hadn't finished my degree, to the grads that were getting hired. But at the same time, like the experience pays, right? Like that's one thing that early on made sense, that work experience, genuine work experience pays. And we actually apply that now at Naya One, just as a sidebar. Is like, if we get interns in or anybody in, it's like, sure, they're gonna do some dirty work, but make sure they'll learn something by the end of the time they leave us, because it's been invaluable for me in the early days.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people listening won't have thought about that kind of a path, right, of going to university but also having a day job in some ways at the same time.
Yeah, kind of ended up. So we were immigrants from India to Australia. Like my parents were, and I'm like, okay, less than 10 years old. Okay, cool, let's go. And then, and as you're growing up, and it's a very, very similar culture to England. It's very multicultural, very, very friendly culture. Like everyone's got a school, like a kind of a side job at school, like whether it's Macca's or Kmart or, M&S type thing. And I picked one of those up. So when I finished school, I'm like, oh, so I could do evening classes for my business degree and actually spend full days working at Kmart. And that's what I did for a couple of weeks, maybe 2 months. And I was like, this is a bit dumb. Like I could actually be doing a proper job. And that's where that's kind of how it fell into it. I mean, 17-year-old getting a 19 grand at that time, like it was pretty good.
Yeah. And then going down that path, right? So obviously you continued in that kind of accounting area, KPMG and those kind of places. What made you decide to keep going down that path, or when was the next fork in the road?
Yeah, so in KPMG, I was actually in a business unit called R&D Tax, which is like any organization that's doing research and development, they can put those dollars against for a tax claim. And that's where I got exposed to a lot of mining tech, a lot of banking tech, a lot of, e-commerce tech. And so that was really nice exposure, because I was able to speak to the owners of these companies and the leaders to kind of understand how they were thinking about product, how they were applying engineering. Hey, not to forget my other degree that I had not yet finished was engineering. So I was able to apply that. And that's what gave me the taste for, one, engineering from a mind, like pure engineering. And secondly, banking tech. That's where it's kind of like got my, first thing. And from there, once I left KPMG, I went into, and you won't even see it anywhere in my resume, because I lasted about 3 weeks, went to work as an engineer at a smeltering plant. Lasted about 3 weeks, dude. That's hard work. That's just a whole different dynamic of, at this point, I've been in an office for about 4 or 5 years. Factory floors are very different. So I ended up weirdly enough, in a tech team at that time, Vodafone, or 3 Mobile. So now I learned SQL for the first time, and I was horrible at it. It's like, okay, better off as a consultant. He can't write code. But anyway, so did that, and then I was like, okay, I'm kind of done here. And then I ended up in insurance kind of thing. So yeah, that's how and then I've been, then that's almost a separate chapter, but that's like the start of financial services for me, financial services tech for me.
I felt that's how this might end up being from smeltering to being a founder.
Yeah.
It's an interesting journey there.
Yeah,
so like fintech founder from smeltering,
from the smeltering factory floor. So once I got into insurance, I got to learn a lot more about the insurance industry, how tech is applied, how the insurance industry. Like when I was there, I was like, whenever I am done with the corporate life, the thing I want to do is an insurance company, because there's so much margin.
I think because it's so fun.
Yeah, no, they're not fun at all. But they're getting fun. But it was more about like, okay, this is a great business. I should get into this. But also within that, I got the opportunity to learn Agile or Scrum, the ways of working. And I think I didn't realize this, but I had the entrepreneurial mindset from very early on. So, one of the organizations around town were paying like, $1,800 or $2,000 a day for an agile consultant. And I'm like, right, I got to meet this guy. Like, what's he doing? What wisdom's coming out to him? So I catch up with these guys and like, just talking common sense, man. Like, you're just straight talking common sense. It's like, yeah, get paid for it. I'm like, all right. So I literally quit.
Yeah.
Oh no, I had another job between that, and like around that point, I was like, all right, this is getting crazy. Now I'm seeing more and more of these people pop up, and I was like, right, I quit. Basically, I set up like an agile consultancy shop. Hired a bunch of people. I scaled that up to like 50 people, and this is before like I'd heard the word VC or any capital, so it was like pure bootstrapped, and it was a people business. So it was a consultancy business. So like again, I had not clocked the margin difference between a consultancy business versus a software business. Yeah, so that was my first entrepreneurial thing. Again, not knowing how to exit a business. So I was like, oh, I'm getting a bit burnt out because like traveling around, different cities. I'm like, okay. And mind you, I was like 26 at that point. So I'm like, I'm getting burnt out. Like, I want to break. Yeah. Like a typical child is when I want to break. So I'm like, I sold the business, go back, get a job. So I did that. Yeah. But then at that point, I kept one of my clients that I was working with and did a bunch of work with them. So
at that point at 26, right? So scaling companies that kind of size, and then like obviously deciding you're burnt out, you want to sell it. How is that from like a mental perspective, right? Of thinking, I've done this at such a young age. Obviously, it must have been doing pretty well. To then be like, okay, I'm going to now go back and work for somebody else. Was that an easy transition, or was it quite just I'm done?
I don't think you understand that at 26. You're like, oh, I just want to do that now. Okay, cool. You go do that. And it's like, because at that point, you're like, well, is there something you can't do? But what do you want to do next? It's like, okay, well, you know what? I haven't done that, so I'm going to go do that. So I guess my mindset's always been about learning. So it's not about. I think a lot of people get caught up on two things, and I've been there myself. So it's the titles and money, right? Titles and money, both are important. But once you accept that titles don't mean anything, it actually comes down to the level of influence you can execute or have. Titles, like once you operate at that level, your title's zero, and then you actually have a much better influence for the right reasons. You're able to operate as a human much better, and once you accept that. Money is just a currency, and it's okay. You'll make it. And don't get me wrong, I chased it. Yeah. And after a while, like, okay, I can make it. It's like, then I kind of have that mindset, okay, it's not about the money, because there's 100 ways to make money. You can do that on putting AI videos on YouTube these days, right? Like, it's not about that, but it's like, so it's like what then drives you is, okay, well, what impact can you have? What do you want to learn? How do you spend your day? And I was getting a bit philosophical here and deep, but the reality is, to your point, how do you go from, how do you change that mindset at 26? It's like, well, it wasn't even a question. Like you're not mature enough to think about those things. But equally, I guess I've always just prioritized learning. The rest will just come. A bit like product people, like, oh, how many? But just solve the right problem for the right reasons. The rest will just fall in place.
We hope you're enjoying the episode so far. We just want to give a quick shout out to our headline partners, HSBC Innovation Banking. One of the biggest challenges for so many startups is finding the right bank to support them. Because you might start off and try to use a traditional bank, but they don't understand what you're doing. You're just talking to an AI assistant, or you're talking to somebody who doesn't really understand what it is you're even trying to do. HSBC have got the team they've built out over years to make sure they understand what you're doing. They've got the deep sector expertise, and they can help connect you with the right people to make your dreams come true. So if you want to learn more, check out hbcinnovationbanking.com. Now, I think it's really interesting because it's a common thing of, in some ways, like people at the beginning when they're chasing that money, but then once you've got to a level where you have that security of knowing you can make money, I think it changes everything, right? So like right now, it's like, I'm not a multimillionaire, I'm not a billionaire, anything like that, but I know that if I had to make money, I could do it. Yeah. Which means that I'm able to do things like I'm doing now where I'm not as money focused, because I have that security. And I think it's one of those interesting things of, in some ways, you've got to chase the money to be able to get the security, to know that you can make the money. And then you can and it's one of the things I've tried to work out is how do you, obviously people listening right now who are on that point right now, they're trying to chase the money, trying to make the money, trying to make ends meet. And it's like, how do they get to that, fast forward for that mindset, right? To get to the stage of actually, it's not just about the money
Yeah,
longer term.
that's an excellent point. And like, I wouldn't change that part of my journey. Like if I had not crossed that bridge, it'll be hard. That doubt will be there. So I think anyone listening, like, chase the money.
Yeah.
Get it done.
It's almost the things like, if you tell people not to chase it, it's like you've got to do it yourself in some ways.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to convince somebody like, oh, money's not important, because they're like, oh, it's fine for you, you're rich, right? Yeah.
Fine for you and Bentley to say that, but it's not true. But I think you're right. Like, when we were young, people were like, oh, it's not about the money. And I was like, but what they didn't say, and I think we should say, is it's not about the money at some stage.
Yeah.
You should absolutely prove out the skill that you as an individual are able to look after yourself, but prioritize learning equally with it. Because you also see a lot of people just go into the ranks and, not knowing left from right. And I think end of the day, it's about your foundations and what you've learned.
Yeah, it's like when you said about job titles, for example, is from somebody who's now outside the corporate space, it's really confusing to work out who actually makes decisions sometimes. Because people have different job titles. Like, is this senior or is this junior? Like, I don't really know. Like,
we talk about it every day
so
at
confusing.
work.
Like,
yeah, we sell into banks, and it's like, from one bank to another, like, titles mean I mean, they're similar titles, but that could just mean totally different things.
Yeah. At some places, obviously, a vice president means literally just below C-suite. At other places, that's the entry level thing. So it's like, it's the same job title, but it means very different things. So I think it's one of the challenges that I think people want to bubble. They're very much focused on the job title within their own company, but they don't realize that everybody else in the world, they don't really care. They don't really understand what your job title even means. So it's a status symbol that actually has less
important.
Weight
It's important, and especially as you're growing up. Like, it is important, and I know from our community point of view, like, that is important. Like, because it depends, how beautiful your bride's going to be at some point, or But at the same time, like, I think I just keep going back to, like, the content of that job and what you can influence, and where that gets you is probably to be prioritized more. Because if you can do the job, you've got the content, you can pivot into a much bigger title in a year's time. So it's a stepping stone as well.
Whereabouts are we in the so obviously just before starting Naya One, you were at a company for quite a significant time and made quite a big impact there. Can you tell us a bit about that last role just before Naya One?
I was in Sydney, right? Now I was at Westpac, so I was like, okay, I said to my boss, like, okay, well, thank you for the opportunities, but I'm leaving. And I was like, oh, why are you leaving? And then I was like, well, I'm going to go check London now. Everyone talks about it, and if I don't do it now, it'll get too late in the life and I won't be able to do it. I was like, I've got a role open. Why don't you interview for it? And that's kind of how, I went through about 7-8 interviews and got through to the process and arrived on the day of Brexit. Happy days. And
Bet you felt welcome.
Yeah. Well, your salary just dropped 30% because, the pound had dropped at that point for Brexit. It was a great role. I got so much to learn, and I just keep saying it's all about context and exposure, right? So, so here's an interesting one. My title in Sydney was lower than my title in London. The content of my job was an impact. Well, content of my job was much greater to when I first landed in London, and a 2-year earlier point, it just comes down to, like, what's within the company, what it means. But, I'd always been on the side of building product and getting it to our customers. And that's something I know I enjoy now. Having reflected, what do you enjoy doing? I actually enjoy building product that drive value for people. And then when I got to London, I was looking after, it was very administrative role. So it was a regional CIO, head of technology role. And it's something I hadn't done before. So it was actually really interesting. And I know you've been in tech, so it's like really interesting to see the other side of tech, not just shipping product, throwing it over the fence and like, good luck. It's like, now you're on the other side catching everything that's coming through. Plus also, like, being in those kind of roles in UK are super good. I can't tell you how great those roles are, because you have to interact with regulators, barring that to go your customers, internal customers, your staff, the usual stuff. But the difference is you actually have to interact with the regulators, you have to interact with the industry, and it's like you're almost running like a mini business to an extent, to kind of go, well, I need to make sure, like, we're servicing the right things and so forth. So that was really, really, really great learning. You automate your job, that's the part of you grow your people, you do all those good things. But the learning of being on the other side of the fence was super important. I'd say, to what I'm able to do today, like it's really important because I learned quite a lot from that experience. It's incremental experiences.
So then while you were there, obviously the idea for Naya One came about. How did that come about, and what was the original version of Naya One, if it's changed since then?
It was around 2018, and we're like, okay, the market was going through a bit of a shift, and it was like, okay, well, we should start working with fintechs because building your stuff out takes a lot of time, so to speak. So let's build something, and but trying to work with fintechs was super hard as an organization. And I thought, maybe it was me because I've not been in innovation roles before or don't know how to do this, but, I know how to build a product and have a team. And so I spoke to a couple of peers in the industry. It just turns out like that was an issue across industry, that trying to partner with fintechs to collaborate, build products and get it to your customers is a genuine problem, because as a regulated entity, you have to protect the bank, its users, its stakeholders, to make sure that, no willy-nilly company walks in, build a product, and you put everyone at risk. So there's good third-party risk management at play. But my problem with that was, I totally get that. We should, because I just finished that role in cybersecurity and operational resilience. But I don't even know if that company's real.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they have a product. I don't even know if it's going to be good for us. So why do I have to go through 6 months, 9 months of onboarding the little company on, which is going to be an absolute killer for them and a mind-boggling thing for me and my team and the bank, when I just want to test that whether they actually have a good product or not. So, I was like, that sounds a bit illogical. And I was like, maybe I don't know how to do this. So I spoke to peers, and I just found out like the industry just didn't operate that way. And that's where the idea came from. And originally it was called Fintech Sandpit. It was because we were doing a sandbox for a fintech. This is all outside the bank and everything. But at the same time, what we saw was it wasn't just for fintechs. There's insurtechs, there's regtechs, and it wasn't just about the sandbox. The customers needed synthetic data. They needed a lot more, and that's why I was like, okay, we go with Naya One, and Naya is an Indian word for new. And it's about transformation. So, and one of the reasons behind, because you don't leave a nice bank tech job to go, right, I'm going to go set up a platform business during the pandemic because it sounds like fun. It's hard. It's the way I think about it. The world's constantly changing. You got different customer expectations, a lot of regulation, a lot of economic headwinds, a lot of black swan events that we don't even know coming down. But there's some great ones we can see. For organizations to adapt, they will need to change. Like change is the only constant we keep hearing, right? And most organizations are tech organizations. That's the backbone. So they need tech to adapt. Technology adoption is a real thing. Procurement and buying the technology is a step before that. So if you take 9 months to buy one piece of tech, you are dead in the water. You can't respond to your customers, to your regulators, to your own staff. And that's okay. So everyone will need a new piece of technology. Okay, Naya, right? And if you go into one place to get it, that's where the one comes. So it's like a single platform where you go and get your fintech, insurtech, enterprise tech type needs.
And obviously setting this up, like you said, because traditionally people think about the banks and places like that as some of the hardest places to get into, as you said, for the 9 months and how long the procurement process can take. But obviously you're now starting a new business, even though you've got experience in the industry. How do you get those first people to kind of say this is a great idea, we want to be a trial customer for you, and to get those beta users on board?
I think we got extremely lucky. We have some of the biggest brands in UK that are our customers, and we're not that old. And I can assure you, I didn't call any of my industry friends to make that happen, because really, again, to some of the things we've been discussing, if I did that, I wouldn't actually know if the product had any value, right? So it's like, if you're going to call your friends and make a sale, sure, it's important to do that. It's part of the business, but I wouldn't have known, because then I pulled the favor. I still haven't had need to do that. So we literally we went through the front door, and it was hard because we're learning how to pitch. But that's what makes you towards the end. I think not doing that shortcut is the only way to accelerate is to do more of that and faster, rather than they're having any hacks to how do you get into banks quickly. I mean, no silver bullet there.
And Obviously, you've now scaled this quite a bit in just a few years. How did it work for you in terms of building the MVP? Was it something where you needed a bit of capital to get that going at the beginning, or did that kind of come later on? Or what was the kind of funding journey like for you?
I bootstrapped it from the beginning. So we hired a few people, got to go and get the MVP, start talking to and then we took a pre-seed in like 2021 it was an interesting one. I was like, because this is my, my first proper VC conversation. It's like, okay, what valuation do you want? And obviously at the peak at that time, right? And I'm like, and I was asking dumb questions all around the city. I'm like, how do you come up with valuations? Like, whatever you feel like. And I'm like, it's not making much business sense to me. So, the markets here, like, the brackets here, I'm like, all right, we're going to go somewhere in the middle that feels about right. And like, that's kind of how we did. So we took some pre-seed money then, and only last year or earlier this year, how you want to look at it, we did a seed round for our scale, for the number of people that we are. We actually haven't needed to take that much money on, and because it's a new concept in the newish concept in the market, I didn't want to take a lot of money. And maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong, but it served us well because it took a lot of money. It just paints a target on your back to be, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And I was like, well, actually, no, I need to get the product right. Like, we can scale this, but just like the first, you get the product, you can actually, within the first, after the first year, we could actually see our customers driving some real value. And I was like, okay, now we should get some money and now we can scale it, kind of thing. But even then, like, revenue was largely revenue fueled. I was like, okay. So we just hired a bunch of people in States because we're getting a lot of interest out of there. And so just raised some money late last year to support that.
So you mentioned there about the customers getting the value from the product. What do you think some of your biggest wins have been so far? Like, what you're most proud about on the journey so far?
The biggest, some of the things that I get most proud of is, and I know you asked the product question, but it's actually
it's not just about the product.
Yeah, how our team has each other's back without even asking is like that cultural element. Like, that makes me most proud. We had a big event earlier this week, and I know it's only Wednesday. I didn't have to ask anything. No one had to ask anything. Just like 15 people got around each other and helped each other and just pushed it forward for an excellent outcome for the client. So that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of from because it's not about that right now. You know what that is in 2 years' time. Like, so my job is to protect that culture and grow that culture so that we can get that to 100, 150 people. From a product and a customer, what we set out to do, we sit between enterprises and tech. So from an enterprise, that they're able to make a decision to get a product in, to accelerate their implementation so they can get a product, that makes me proud and happy. Like, we see that day in, day out, because that means the product is the customer, the end customer, you and me, are getting better financial services products, and it's not caught up in some 3-year cycle to get implemented. So as a thing, why we should do this, like, so seeing that happen is very, very sobering, and like, okay, we're on the right track here. Improving the quality of conversations between the enterprise and fintechs, that also gives us a lot of pride in terms of, like, you're not wasting a lot of time door knocking. You said, how did you get your first couple of customers? Well, now if our customers can go to the Naya One marketplace, and if the right tech providers are on there, it's a bit like Google. Your customer is looking for you rather than you looking for them. So that makes us happy, and we see, the uptick on that data. The other thing that makes us quite proud as a team is actually accelerating the journey for the founders, other tech companies who've got good products, who've got, solving the right problems, because they don't have to wait 12 months for a decision. They can actually get a decision in 6 to 8 weeks. That, I think, overall accelerates the whole ecosystem. And that's why, it would have been much easier for when we started this to set up a credit card company or an SMB business. But that would have been outdated in 3 years' time. Like, there would have been. But setting a platform is often a harder business, but it's worth it. Like, the traction's there for us. And we're seeing the value on all fronts. We're seeing the value from our enterprise customers. We're seeing the value from our marketplace side, founders and their teams, that they're actually able to accelerate their transaction, and these guys are able to accelerate their transformation to help the end consumer. So it's funny. At some point, you have that reflections like, actually what you're doing is you're doing financial inclusion, but at a B2B scale. Because when we talk about financial inclusion, we're like, okay, what financial inclusion products are there? But actually, it's about how in the supply chain, how quickly can you get the product out to that consumer? It's kind of, sometimes I reflect on that.
And where's it all going? So what's the hope and the ambition where now, when you mentioned about in 2 years' time, 150 people, but beyond that, what you're thinking, what you're going for?
Our vision is to be the place where enterprise goes to buy technology. And we genuinely want to fix every part of that process, of that value chain that accelerates that. We started in financial services because that's who we are, where we came from. But, we're talking to airlines, we're talking to media companies. Like, everybody needs tech. And the way the world currently buys technology is very, very 80s. And I think, by the time you have an idea as an enterprise and you get it to your customer's hand, that's 2 to 3 years. Your customers probably had 4 iPhone upgrades or two new phones in that time. And it's like, well, that's the kind of expectation level you're dealing with here. So it's almost, I see from an enterprise point of view, is also like in financial services, especially, it's a race to survival. Not necessarily UK, but just around the world, that to stay relevant, to stay in front of your customer. Definitely think, because otherwise fintech eats lunch.
So thanks so much for your story today. We're going to have to move on to quick fire questions. So first one is, who are 3 British Asians you think are doing incredible work and you'd love to shout them out today?
I've always been a big fan of Oak North. Rishi Khosla, like just how quickly and impact-wise they've been able to scale. And so the other one that I quite like, and you'd probably be embarrassed, is the founder and CEO of WealthOS. It's a growing company, it's an emerging company, Anton Padmasuri. And he's, just again, he's got the right mindset, trying to build the right product with the right people, and the hustle's there. He's a really good guy. So I want to shout out to those guys.
And if you want to find out more about you and what you're up to, where should they go to?
NayaOne.com and my LinkedIn. I'm trying to be more and more active there.
And is there anything that you need help with right now, or Naya One needs help with?
I mean, in terms of help, that's super kind. Again, we're a two-sided marketplace with a platform. So if you're an enterprise that's looking to solve a problem, have a cool tech provider that you want to work with, we'd love to help you. And equally, if you're a fintech founder who's looking to get into enterprises, please do get in touch. We want to make sure we've got the best quality fintech marketplace out there.
Awesome. So thank you so much for coming on today. Have you got any final words?
Thank you for having me. This has been a great conversation. And your line of question just made me think. And I think if there's one thing I'd leave behind is context and exposure as part of your journey. I think they're probably the most important things to prioritize on. The rest just falls into place.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.